Guys, thanks for joining tonight. This is a webinar that I've been working on for a few months. In case you don't know who I am, my name's Kotton Grammar. I've had a moderate amount of success through online ventures, and I've been able to accumulate a little bit of money doing it. And what I didn't realize is through my mindset is what was able to get me to achieve this. And what we're going to talk about tonight, I really want you to open up your mind. I really want you to just be loose with things. This is how I get things done. What I'm going to talk about tonight might not work for everyone. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a guru. I'm not anyone. I'm just a simple guy who was born in Southern Illinois, who's had a reasonable amount of success. Hopefully what I'm going to share with you today can help you achieve some greater amounts of success. And what I want to do is the title of the webinar is what I really wanted to name it is How I Made My First Million Through Time Travel. And even though that you think this could be a funny or hilarious webinar, this is actually going to be a very, very serious webinar. And what we're going to talk about right now but I want to start out with a little bit of fun. What I want to do is get your mind kind of ready for what we're getting ready to talk about. And talk about time travel, parallel universes, and things that can happen, and how it can actually help you achieve your goals if you're able to use them the way that I do. The first thing that we're going to talk about is maybe it's a parallel universe, maybe it's time travel, maybe it's bad memory. I want you to decide what we're going to talk about here. This is the fun stuff. What I want you to do is how many of you have heard Queen's song, We Are the Champions? I want you to, if you're there, I want to hear it. We're in the Facebook group where a lot of people's at right now, and I've heard this song. It's one of my songs that would play during my youth, and we've heard it in sporting events and everything. But here's what's funny about this song is We Are the Champion by Queen's ends differently than many of you recall. Now, I can recall that when I'm listening to the song, it says, we are the champions of the world, and then the song ends. That's how I remember it. That's how many of my friends remember it. Would all of you agree that that's how the song ends? Now, stop and think about it. Many of you will say, yeah, that's exactly how I remember the song ending. But here's the thing. What I want to show you is that never happened. You see, many of us remember the lyrics, no time for losers, we are the champions of the world, and the song ends. But here's what's funny is, there is no of the world. The song just ends. It's driving millions of people crazy because they're 100% sure they've heard it different in the past. Now, I want you to think about it in your mind. I just talked about it. That's a song I've heard 1,000 times. 1,000 times. And what it is that we all remember it a certain way, and it's no longer there. Now, remember the song. You always hear him say, of the world, and the song ends. You go back and listen to YouTube, you go back and listen to older albums, unremixed and everything, what you're going to hear is the song just abruptly ends. And it's not how many people actually remember it. So what is it? That's the question. The next one that I'm going to show you, just to get yourself in the mood and the mind for it, is everyone loves Star Wars, and you guys know that if you follow me very much, that I love Star Wars tremendously. In Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader comes up to Luke Skywalker. What does Darth Vader say to Luke Skywalker? It's his famous quote. I want to see one person just kind of throw it down, and I know you can't see the screen, but I want to see someone just write it down very quickly. You're right. Someone just posted on there saying, Luke, I am your father. We've watched it. I've watched it. I watched it as a child at the theater. I've seen it there. I've seen it this, but here's what I can share with you. Darth Vader doesn't say, Luke, I am your father. It never happens. So what happened? What happened? You know, what he really says is, no, I am your father. So is it misremembered, or is it a blip in time? Did something go back and change? that we didn't remember? How many times have we heard, Luke, I am your father? Any movie you go back and check from a VHS to any tape, he says, no, I am your father. So how did that change? It blew my mind when I started digging into this stuff, because ultimately, when we look at things like this, you can't put your finger on a memory that has happened with you, because only you can judge it. You'll think that you've misremembered it. You'll think that, maybe I just didn't remember it right. But collectively, the reason I'm using media and very popular things is collectively we have the same memories. Collectively, I remember him saying, Luke, I am your father, but it's no longer there, erased from time. How did that happen? Another very famous movie that I'm going to show you next on the next slide is Silence of the Lambs. And Anthony Hopkins gives an absolutely amazing performance as Hannibal Lecter. But what happens is, one of the most famous quotes from the movie is when he comes in and he says, hello, Clarice. How many of you agree with that? That you remember, you can vividly see it if you've seen the movie, that he says, hello, Clarice. I remember it. But the thing about it is this. Hannibal Lecter never said, hello, Clarice. You can go back. There's not one instance in the movie that he ever said it. He doesn't say it. So what happened? Did everyone misremember it? Or did something in the timeline happen to where someone moved back in time, changed things a little bit, and now we remember things a little bit different? How could millions and millions of people not remember things in a certain way? So that's just some fun stuff for you, kind of to twist your mind, to get you in the mood for it, to say there. But there's a lot of stuff like this. It's very weird to go on. I could talk about this sort of stuff for days. And another thing is we're going to have some more fun and just look at other people. People claim that celebrities have the ability to time travel through time. We have Jennifer Lawrence. It looks identical to another person through time. Bruce Willis. This looks to a counterpart from the 1920s. We have John Travolta, who looks almost identical to this guy from the 1850s. Then we come back and we look, Queen Latifah, identical to someone from the 1920s. We've got Jay-Z, who could have been photographed in the 1920s in New York. Let's get a better look. Could be his doppelganger, looks just like him. Nicolas Cage, same way. Eddie Murphy, astounding when you look at these. This looks identical to Eddie Murphy. Then you look at Justin Timberlake. You got, right here, you got Conan O'Brien, and then you have Orlando Bloom. So through time, what happened? Are these people jumping through time? Are they ageless or whatever? Just stuff to think about. I want your mind to be open to this sort of stuff, and it's just kind of a fun way just to get this webinar started. But all of these are very good coincidences. I've shown you how you've thought that things that you remembered no longer existed, and how certain celebrities, and there's more and more, we could just sit here on a roll and just keep going on and on and on. But what I really want to talk to you today is about my experience. And we're going to start out in my timeline, which is 2013. In 2013, what had basically happened is that I was living with my girlfriend at the time. And she kicked me out, even though it was our house. At the time, I didn't have any money. I wasn't sure what to do or where to go. I didn't have enough money to move in anywhere else. Wasn't sure what to do. So I moved into my parents' house, in their basement, actually. And I literally was lost. I didn't know what I was going to do. Felt like a loser. I felt like that my life had just not went the way that it should. Kept hearing people tell me that I was talented, that I was meant for more, that I was meant to be something bigger than what I was. And I felt that people believed in me a little bit more than I believed in myself. I knew that I was okay, but I never thought that I was brilliant or I was good. I lacked something, and I didn't know what it was. And that was fear. I was worried about what other people thought. I loved myself a little, but I cared more about what other people thought about me. And God, the fear of failure just kind of literally paralyzed me. And I know that a lot of you have felt that way too. Paralyzed. You don't have the right processes or information. You don't have what you need. And what I did is I went back to something that I did previously in my life. And that is that I would always time travel in my mind. And I knew that I had the right vessel to do it. I always loved sci-fi. I always loved that stuff. But what I wanted to do is imagine a world where I was successful. So as I laid in bed one night, I closed my eyes and I told myself that I wanted to jump through time and I wanted to talk to me 10 years from now with $1 billion company. And what I did is I closed my eyes and I woke up. And I seen myself. I woke up and I visualized my house. I visualized the furniture. I made mental notes everywhere. I felt like what it was, my clothes in my closet, to my watches, to the car I was driving to work, when I pulled up, what it looked like at the building. My name was on it. I felt like what it was to just stand tall and walk through people, them greet me. Hello, Mr. Grammer. Hello, Mr. Grammer. It's a feeling I'd never felt before. I felt powerful. I felt like I could accomplish anything. All of that was inside me. I went up the elevator. I came inside my office, people handing me things. I walked inside my beautiful office. It overlooked an incredible city, and I seen it. And I was standing there looking at me, successful. And I was like, that is me. At that moment when I stood there, I started to realize that is me. And then I started to realize that the one thing that stopped me from being that person that I was looking at was that I haven't trained my mind to be that person. See, we spend a lot of time with processes and we spend a lot of time trying to find the right answers, but here's the thing. People can smell confidence. People can smell when you just have it. And I looked at that guy and he had it and I didn't. But it was me. And what I slowly started to realize is that was me and I had the answers locked inside of me. I just had to put myself through the paces to get to it. So what I started to do was I started to realize, okay, let me draw my timeline and let me look at it. What does that look like? So I realized that obviously that there's a place right here to where we're born, and there's a place over here to where we die. And here I was just moving through time. Half my life gone. And I was starting to panic because I knew that I possibly had wasted half my time, or maybe even more than half. I didn't know. So conceptually what I did is I would jump into the future and I would start talking to me. And what was weird is when I started putting my mind through the paces of what would it look like? What time would I wake up? What would I be eating? Does that match what I'm doing right now? No. So I would come back and write things down. Do I walk like this? No, I don't. Do I talk like this? Do I dress like this? And what I would start to do is I started to put pictures up everywhere. I could start to see cars, buildings, houses, things I wanted. And I started to become obsessed with closing my eyes at night after I'd worked and moving forward, jumping in time and talking and finding out who I really was, because I didn't know. But this guy seemed to have the answers, but he was me. It made no damn sense to me. And I would come back and I would apply these things. And what I would do is I would jump back. And slowly by slowly, I started to feel a difference. I started to feel that I was becoming him because he was me. You see, I'd never put my mind in the situations to grow. I never did. And what happened is that once I started doing it, my mind started doing incredible things. You see, I feel and I believe that the main reason that many of us haven't had a breakthrough with whatever our dreams or whatever it is that we're trying to achieve is this. You haven't put your mind through the paces to get you there. Then I started to rewind it a little bit and say, well, how did I get there? How did this? After I talked to him, so I just kept jumping out a little further, jumping back. And before long, something strange happened. I vanished. And I became the Kotton from the future. I know it sounds stupid. And I know I'm metaphorically speaking, but that's how I felt. I felt more confident. I felt stronger. I just knew that when you have this sort of command and power and success and everything, you think differently, you walk differently, you eat differently, you live your life differently. Everything happens. But here's the thing. I already had it locked inside of me. And so do you. And what happened blew me away. And I kept doing it every night. Every night. I'd come back and I'd take notes down and take notes down and take notes down. And before long, I realized that I was changing and I was actually a different person and making money. More money than I ever had before. So before I go any further, because I'm going to talk about literally, there's 3 types of future jumps that I do. One's just called a future jump, one's called a micro jump, and one I'm not going to talk about on this webinar, maybe on another one, it's called a death jump. And I'm going to talk about both of those, but what I want you to do right now is, I know it sounds crazy, but what I want you to do is I want you to take a moment right now, wherever you're at. Hopefully it's in a quiet place. And what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes, even if it's for a moment, even if it's difficult, even if there's someone around. And I want you to visualize, what does the home look like that you woke up in? I want you to do it with me, whenever you want to do it. And feel it. What does it look like? What's your clothes like? What is your car like? The building that you own. What does it look like when you walk in the lobby? What does it look like? What does it look like to stand in your office and look out when you're getting ready to go home? The stuff that you feel that, and if you're doing it right now, and I hope you are, and if you're not, then do it on the replay. You're going to find that you start to feel empowered, that the fear starts to roll away and drip away. And you start to shed who you are, and you start to become the other person. See, ultimately what I even called it is through me talking to my future self. He once told me, you have to go back and you have to almost murder yourself and let me take your place. Let me go back. Ultimately, that's what happened. You can visualize anything you want. You can visualize what your mate looks like. Anything. You can do that. Anything. And you can have it. But if you don't know what you want, you don't know what it's like, you don't know what it feels like to have it, I don't believe that you can ever have it. The one thing that I want you to focus on when you do this exercise, whenever you get a chance to do it, is this. If you can't condition your mind to be that billion-dollar man or woman, it's going to be very hard for you to have these growing pains forward, or to even conceptualize why you need to work so hard, or why you need to do this, what you need to do to achieve your goals. Maybe it's you want to go to medical school. Maybe you want to start up your own company. Maybe you want to be a better mother. Maybe you want to do whatever. If you can't conceptually jump in time and see what it is and get to know that person, then guess what? I don't think that it's going to be very, very, very hard for you to. And I can get into a whole lot more detail with this, with the future jumps, but it's pretty much it. It's just common sense. You need to get to know your successful self that you visualized. You'd be shocked at all the answers that you have. You know you're not waking up at the right time. You know that you're not doing what you're supposed to set you on the path for your goals. You know that. You know that. Another thing I'm going to talk about is this. So we've talked about the future jump, how it's so important for you to get to know yourself. And also, if you don't do this for at least a month and really get to know that person, it's going to be really hard to do what we're going to talk about in a few moments, which is going to be jumping in the past. You have to have a very strong foundation and a very strong pillars and structure innerly for you to jump back. And that's why it's so important for you to take your time with this and to get to know that billion-dollar you. You have all the answers. Something that I learned when I future jump is this, is I would do things called micro jumping. You say, well, what is a micro jump? Well, a micro jump is fairly easy. I would literally jump forward a few hours or a few days. You know, I'm a consultant, and there were meetings. So what I would do is, the old saying is, you know, the best preparation sometimes wins the war, maybe even before a shot's fired. So what I've always done is I've micro jumped, and I placed myself in that meeting, and I've known exactly what they were going to say, or put myself through the worst possible scenarios. That's what I call anticipation defense. That's what I do with everything. I anticipate everything before it happens. Any big events, through my consulting, through my business, through my talks, through my relationships, through my everything, I micro jump and I do what is called anticipation defense. Now, if you're listening and you're in the Facebook group, I want you to give that, because I want you to remember this. Give me hashtag anticipation defense. And what happens is that when you move forward, a lot of you ask questions that you don't need to ask. If you would have put in the proper preparation through micro jumping and through just doing anticipation defense, you would have all of your questions answered. Well, what would happen, and I'm just going to stick with consulting because it's what I do. You know, what if the client says this? Am I prepared to answer it with that? And then I would have it prepared. So when I micro jump forward, I have everything already laid out before the war ever starts. Then when I get to the live event, there is no surprises. You can do this with anything. You can do this with fitness. You can do it with anything. You can micro jump ahead. You can micro jump ahead for meetings. What's the worst possible thing that can happen in this meeting at work? You can micro jump ahead with relationships and whatever else, and prepare yourself. But the problem with a lot of people that stumbles in with their success is they don't do enough anticipation defense. That's the problem. You don't anticipate. You don't take the time to plan it out, to look ahead, to jump time travel in the future, a micro jump, and sit yourself there and close your eyes and write down all the notes that can happen. And when you do this, whatever you do with your business, whether you're in fitness, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're online consulting, you have an online business, anything that you do, I guarantee you that your business will explode when you start using an anticipation defense and start jumping forward in time, micro jumping, and getting that preparation ready. It's worked for me every time. This is exactly what I was able to do to earn my success. I become a master at micro jumping. And I think you can too. And I want you to remember that. When you sit there and when you micro jump for anything, I guarantee you, I want you to message me or find me somewhere and say, Kotton, oh my God, I started doing this with everything. My business blew up. My personal life blew up, everything. It's one of the things that I can't stress enough. The most powerful form of time travel is to take your mind and jump forward. So I think you got the idea with that. We can do webinars and hours talking about this. I'm conceptually running through everything to do with between seconds. There's a whole lot more about micro jumping that we could talk about for hours as well. Next thing that I want to talk about is jumping back in time. And jumping back in time, as I told you before, there's some simple rules with it, and one is you really need to get really good at jumping forward. Jumping forward is very easy to do. Very easy. Jumping back is a little harder, but sometimes you get thrown back without even knowing it. And I'm going to talk about right here that I've discovered basically 3 types of time jumps going back in time. And they are simple. One is called an information bomb. One is called a revelation bomb. And the other is called Inception. And we're going to talk about each of those right now. Now, the information bomb, I've experienced several of those in my life, and they're so crazy. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back, and I'm going to use the example. Timeline, 2010. During this time, I could remember seeing her, looking at her for the very first time, and her smile was just amazing. I knew I was in love, maybe for the first time. And through that, I learned to trust her, and she taught me many things. She taught me how to be a better person. She taught me everything, and in many ways, I really looked up to her and wanted to be her in so many ways. And I literally believe that through all the times that we sat around and talked and we planned our lives out together, that this was really the person that I would be with. And what we're going to do is when we do these back in time is here's the timeline. And what we do is this is back in time. So what happened, what I experienced, and maybe you can relate to me. What happened is I found out eventually, after I ended the relationship, that this very person had been in a serious relationship for over 1.5 years before I ended it. And at that moment, that I discovered that information to be factual. It literally felt like someone ripped me out of my timeline. Because what happened is everything rushed back to right there. And all of a sudden, this happened, and I had a new timeline. And you say, well, I don't understand. I literally felt like someone put my life on pause. That information traveled back to 2010, dropped it in my timeline. And at that point, in that moment, for some reason, I couldn't breathe. I felt nauseous, and I felt everything. What had happened? I don't ever feel like this. And within a few moments, I was no longer in love with her. And I really was indifferent towards her because I got thrown, in my opinion, into a different timeline. That information weaved my mind. It's so powerful that it went back to 2010, dropped, and reweaved a new timeline all the way up front. For the first few days, I was a little confused. I didn't understand what was going on. And, I'd do what I have wrote down, and I've tried to make myself understand how I feel. So I've created this whole time travel world, and I call it phasing. I still wanted to go back to that girl that was on that original timeline. But you see, that girl doesn't exist. She doesn't exist. I now had information that changed who she was from the moment I met her to right now. The girl that I was in love with and the girl that I thought that was who I wanted to be with and perfect, she's on a different timeline now. I'm on one to where the person that did deceived me for 1.5 years. And that was the first time that I really felt, well, one of many, but I started to conceptualize, why does things feel so differently? Why did it feel like that my life was paused and ripped out? And I still feel the phasing a little bit right now. There are days that go by and When you have that sort of strong feelings for someone, you kind of feel that phasing, like you're, but then I quickly catch myself. She doesn't exist. She doesn't exist. And that's one part of jumping back. That's the information bomb. When you find things in your life that reveal itself that are of negative nature, that go and rush back into your timeline and just explode and rewire your mind all the way up front and give you a totally different trajectory of where your life and your feelings are. How many of you ever felt that? I mean, just be honest. You know, if you're in the Facebook group, I'm looking on my other computer, just give me an I have. An I have. That you felt a piece of information get dropped in your timeline. And just all of a sudden, everything changed. Could have been something bad, negative, anything. Everyone has. But you know, it's also a good thing that I conceptualized it and wrote it out like this. See, because that line where it says new timeline right there on your screen, I can never get back to those arrows. No matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, it's over. It's done. I'm on a different place in a different time. That's what I call the information bomb, is what it happens. And I truly believe that with this, and we're going to build up to something that's going to be pretty magnificent here in a second. So this is the information bomb. The next is timeline 1992. In 1992, if many of you don't know me, my family had an apple orchard, one of the largest apple orchards in the United States. We provided the majority of the United States with apples. So I grew up on an apple farm, and I grew up with my family, working in my family business. The year was 1992, and I was working with my family, and my father and I were doing what we normally did. And my father was my best friend. He was the greatest father. He's just an amazing man. But he's also human. I can remember we're out working in the apple orchards, and you know, I was sharing with him back and forth. We would banter back and forth about sports, and it's where I gained my love for sports. We would talk about who the greatest running back was, who the greatest baseball player was, because we spent all day outside just, you know, nursing baby peach trees or baby apple trees and pruning them and making cuts on them that only we knew how to do. So I revealed to my dad at that moment, you know, we were out there for 8 hours a day with just our mind just wandering and just ourselves to talk to with thousands of acres. I said, Dad, you know what? I said, I think I made up my mind. By the time I'm 30 years old, I'm going to make $100,000 a year, and I'm going to have a Ferrari by the time I'm 30 years old. And I can remember looking at my dad, and he just kind of snapped a look back over at me, and he goes, what? He's like, look, chances are you're never going to make any more money than you're going to make working right here at this farm. Back in 1992, $100,000 was a lot of money. And my dad basically told me at that moment that it probably would have never happened, that I'll probably never do it. Well, what my dad doesn't realize is that conversation and him shooting back that statement to me really altered me. It shook me in a way. And I didn't resent him for it. I just respected him enough to where I wanted to prove him wrong. I wanted to show him that a multi-million-dollar successful business that my grandfather ran, that my grandfather had a thumb over my dad and I. You know, my dad didn't make that much money under my grandfather owning the business, nor did I. And I was kind of led to believe that all I was ever going to be was an apple farmer that made $40,000 or $50,000 a year, isolated, out in the middle of nowhere with nothing. So the next year I decided to move. And we'll jump forward again to where when I was 30 years old, I had my dad with me. And he visited Florida. And I showed my dad my tax returns. And he said, oh, well, that's like great. Made over $100,000. Then I decided to take my dad on a drive to a Ferrari dealer, show him. And he didn't understand. And I had to explain to him why we were doing this. My dad didn't remember saying it, but I still remembered it. I still remembered it. And, I remembered it for over 20 years. It's driven me. It's haunted me. It's sat on my shoulder. Something very strange happened within the last year. I was sitting down and I was speaking with my mother, and my mother told me something that changed everything. My mother said, "Yeah, your your father's never been that emotional. I don't even remember how we were talking about it." And she basically said, "Yeah, I think the time your dad cried the hardest was when you moved." What? Dad cried? Yeah. Wow. At that moment, that's when the revelation bomb hit. It went all the way back to that field. Boom. And I realized that my dad said what he said because he didn't want me to leave, because he loved me, and he didn't want his best friend to leave. You see, things like that happen all the time. We carry things that we shouldn't. If we could go back and add context, we're told information between years, months, days, minutes, and between seconds. And that information, literally because of that, in 1 second, it went back to 1992 and rewired all of my brain right up front to this day. And it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders because it was something totally different than what it was. And how many times have we done this? Have we found out something that we've carried with us for so long, it's held us down, and we didn't have all the information? If we would have known that one thing, what if that thing that your wife, your brother, your sister, what if that one thing that they told you at that time and you haven't forgiven them, what if you didn't know the context behind it? What if there's more? What if there was more? Would it change how you think? Could you carry that burden? Could you carry that weight? And when I started to realize this, that how that changed my whole timeline by understanding that, then I was able to move freer because I didn't have these burdens and these things that were holding me back and holding me down. So I want you to stop and think. When you get time, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to really believe what's really worth holding on to that's sitting on your shoulder. Some people you can forgive, some you can't. My dad's always been a great man, and I understand that some people can't be forgiven, and that's who I'm talking about. And this generally works for me. I can't say that it works for everybody. But if you can literally release some of the weight to move quicker, to feel more nimble, then do so. Go back. And that's what I'm going to talk about, another one, which is going to help you with this. And it's something that I've called this, Inception. And what Inception is simply this. We just talked about some of the pain that's had. And you know what? I'm like looking at the Facebook group right now. I want you to give me hashtag pain right now. If you're holding on to a grudge, you're holding on to a weight of something for years, for a year or longer, I want you to be honest. I want you to give me a hashtag pain. Something that just bothered you and you just can't shake it. It weighs you down like a weight. It's hard to walk. You've had these things. I've had those. I've had them. And what I've had to do, and I'm seeing a lot of pains here, everyone has them. How do you get rid of them? This is how I've got rid of the majority of mine. It's a very lengthy process. And like I said, before you start doing these, be very strong with knowing yourself, being successful, being confident, and going back. Because the pain can drag you down. What I've done with many instances is I've went back. And what I've done is I went back in time. And what I've done is moved back in time, and I've taken a piece of information, even if it isn't true, and I've let that affect my timeline and move forward. What I've had to do is that's why I call it Inception. A friend sits there and tells you that you're worthless. A girlfriend, a husband, a brother, a sister. Just using that as an example. Let's say that they told you that you're worthless and called you all these names, and you decided you would never speak to them again. And I'm using this as an example. What I did was I traveled back in time, and I relived that moment, and I added more information to it. I want you to think about that. I said, you know what? They just found out that they lost their job, and they never told me. And I was the only person around, and they were lashing. If you knew something like that, could you forgive that person? Of course you could. I've went back and I've focused on all of these things, and you can too. You take it, and I've had to jump back and plant this information back in time many times for it to stick. It doesn't work the first time. Something's painful, you got to go back. And normally, you know what they say, if you lie enough, you start to believe your own lie. Well, I went back and planted false information in my past to get over certain things so I could have this new timeline. And it's helped me move faster, better, and everything. And it's literally one of these things right here that literally is incredible if you get great at it, no matter what you do. It isn't worth the pain. We have so little time, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. We have so little time that to hold on to this pain, to hold on to everything is crazy. So I'm telling you, what I want to see so everyone understands it, I'm looking at the Facebook group from another screen. I'm going to leave it right here. I want you to give me a hashtag Inception. I want you, if you've seen the movie, you know that they go back and they plant information inside someone's dreams, and they steal stuff here. That's where I got the idea from. You know, if I could be so affected by finding out that someone that I was in love with did something and it rewired me all, why can't I go back and plant something good and rewire it all the way back up front? See, your mind's an incredible thing, and we're the ones that are in control of it. And a lot of us have let our minds run wild. Run wild. That's it. I just refused to let my mind run wild. I refused. So what I did was I've taken control. And so can you. It's what you choose to remember. It's what you choose to go back and plan. You know, maybe if it's something so painful, find something and plant information there. Even erase it if you can. It's not going to happen the first time. It's not going to do that. Jumping back in time is very, very difficult, especially the deeper the wound, the more painful it is. Sometimes I've had to go back 10 or 15 times before it to stick and for me to heal and for me to jump on a new timeline. So very, very, very powerful things. And I want you to remember all of them. You know, I just talked about one, which is called the information bomb. Where information, you hear it, and it literally feels like you want to throw up. It feels like that your life is on, someone paused it through you in a parallel universe and unpaused it. And it's like, what just happened? That information. Then there's the revelation bomb. Something good. You find out something that heals you. A good piece of information. Something that alters your timeline in a good way. That's the revelation bomb. And those are always welcome. And then there's what I called Inception. When you sneakily go back into your own past and you give different meaning to what happened there. It's the meaning that you create is what will rewire your mind all the way to present day. And that's how you can live the rest of your life. It's up to you. It's all up to you. I've been doing this my whole life, and I didn't even know I was doing it. That's the thing. I had to sit and think, how am I able to do this? I thought this was normal. And until I sat and wrote down conceptually what I was doing and realized that I was jumping back and forward through time, you see, that is what fueled me for my success in my business. And what happened from jumping forward is I learned a couple things that were incredibly powerful, which is if you find a process that works, that's what we spend the most of our time and lives trying to do, finding a process that works. Whether it be for success, whether it be for anything that you do, finding the right process. Well, see, I was able to find the right process. Then, the second rule that I learned from talking to my future self was this: progress, not perfection. You see, the further that we push ahead with progress, no matter how small it is, no matter how we eke forward, remember, water is comforting and soothing, and it feels great when we take a shower. But that same water, over time, can take down boulders, rocks, mountains, create streams, create rivers, because of one thing, because of progress, not perfection, and persistence. So once you find the right process, then it's simply progress, not perfection, and persistence. That's what I learned from moving forward. And if you can learn those things right there, you're going to be amazing at whatever you choose to do. One of the most powerful things I learned from jumping forward, one of the things I wanted to share with you. The next thing is time. You know, time's one of these things to where we really don't have a lot of it. But one thing is this: it's simply the most valuable commodity that we have as humans. And I really, when I stopped to realize that, of what we do with time, it's literally all we have. It's one thing that we've got. And you know what's funny is with time, it can't be saved. You can try. It can't. Time, it can't be spent. Can't spend it. And time is irreplaceable. You can never get it back once it's gone. And you know, things like that is when you start looking at time, it literally, if you control and if you can master and bend time to your will, then you can start taking your processes, your successful processes that you've got, and doing micro jumps and figuring out anticipation defense for people ahead of you, jumping forward, getting to know your successful self, getting to feel what it's like to be there, to do that, to experience it, to get there. It's what you do. And if you're slowed down by pain, if you're slowed down by things that have happened in the past, you can always go back and inception it. It's pretty simple. But you know what? Time, there's some people that waste it. A lot of us waste it. How many times do people simply don't respect your time? They waste it. And you know what? Some people feel that they're a victim of time. And that's what I really want to kind of focus on a little bit more. Some people feel that time's really been bad to them, that their situations and circumstances, they just can't find a way to dig themselves out. You've always talked to these people that sit around and they say, you know what? I've had it bad. I've had this. I've had, this has happened. That's happened. I always shake my head. And I want to give you an example about how bad that it can virtually get for someone. And it's this. There was a guy at age 3. His father left their family. By the time that he was 6 years old, his father was non-existent. They had moved around so much. He'd never heard from him since. He attended 4 different high schools and struggled with dyslexia. To finally, eventually, he left high school without even earning a diploma. At a very young age of 23, his closest friend died of a drug overdose. Shortly after that, his younger sister was diagnosed with leukemia. He found the love of his life, Jennifer, and she got pregnant. They were in love. 8 months later, their child was stillborn. Devastated by the death, it eventually ended their relationship. A few months later, Jennifer would die in a car accident. Now, if you think you've had a bad life, that's stacking the decks pretty good there. I would say that if anyone wanted to say that he was a victim of time, he could do it. He could do it. But you know what? He never did. Because he realized one thing, that in life, everyone has to go through difficult things, and there's a way through it. And what he did was after he made his first $110 million, he gave over 80 million of it away for leukemia research and to the people that he worked with. And this person is Keanu Reeves. And if you've talked to him, and I've watched many interviews with him, he's not regretful. He's not regretful about what time's done to him. He's found a way to get over it. And many of you sit and think that time has been bad to you, that you've been dealt bad cards, or just it wasn't right. Well, here's what I can tell you. And I want you to listen to this message right here. If you've ever seen or you feel that you're a victim of time, you know, being successful or achieving your goals, it's never about the resources. It's never about what happens to you. It's simply about your resourcefulness. That's it. And I want you to remember that. It's never about your lack of resources. We all have the same resources. You know, you can go to YouTube right now. You can find out how to build websites. You can find out how to do anything. You can find out how to fix computers. You can find out how to do anything. You can be resourceful as hell. So when people sit and they say, life's dealt me a bad card, I don't have the resources like you did to be as successful as you. Well, I simply did it with my mind. And I also could have done it by just simply being more resourceful. And that's really the lack of why a lot of people don't succeed. It's never the resources, it's the resourcefulness. So when someone says, I don't have enough money to go to college, I don't have enough knowledge, or no one will show me how to do something, I can show you a YouTube video that will show you how to do it in 3 seconds. It's right there. It's your resourcefulness. And that's what I want you to understand. I want you to give me, for those of you that are in the Facebook group and I'm watching it, I want you to give me #resourcefulness. It is literally the key through time of bending it, owning it, and being successful. It's how resourceful you can become. We're all dealt the exact same things. We all have access to the internet. You can go to the library, you can get on it. If you want to learn how to build a house, there's YouTube videos on how to build a house. If you want to learn how to build a fire, there's how to build a fire. How to fix an iPhone, they're on there. You can start your own business doing whatever it is you want to do. You don't have to work for someone else. So when someone says, well, I didn't have the same opportunities as you, point them out. It's not your resources, it's your lack of resourcefulness. That's exactly why they're not. And that's what Keanu Reeves was. Instead of just sucking down in a hole and just thinking his life was over, you know, the guy is even an actor and has dyslexia and has a struggle to read and memorize his stuff and still did it because of his resourcefulness. Never be a victim of time. Never be a victim of time. The next one up is some people feel like that they have an unlimited amount of time when they never do. You know, it really hit me really hard as early as Saturday. I was sitting there and I watched an elderly lady walked in that reminded me so much of my grandmother. She was dressed so sharp. You know, she had on her pants, her nice shoes, and I could tell that she had her hair done, her nails, and she appeared to be in her late 80s, maybe 90s. And she struggled to walk in. And she sat down. And I looked at her, and she just stared ahead. And I asked myself, what is she thinking? What is going on? And I started thinking about the speech, and I was thinking, man, she can't jump forward that far. She can only jump back. Is she thinking about what happened in the past? And then I started to think, and it really started to get me choked up. What if I was on my deathbed? What would I change? What would I do differently? Because I don't have an unlimited amount of time. I don't. But she had limited time. Maybe she had a year, 2 months, 6 months. But it moved me so much by just sitting there. And, you know, when you've talked to people who are on their deathbed at the very end of it, they'll sit and say that the things that mean most to them are that they worked too much. They didn't spend enough time with their family. They didn't kindle past friendships and make them last. They didn't travel enough. And they didn't speak out enough, and they didn't love enough. And, you know, once I did that, once I thought about that, it really started to change my perspective on things of what was important as well. What is important? I don't have an unlimited time left. And I realized that the older I get, the less I can jump forward. And that really started to just kind of take hold of me a little bit. I was like, wow. And I realized my mortality. And I started to look at things very, very, very differently. So when it comes to time, you don't have an unlimited amount. What I encourage you to do, we're just talking about time right now because we're talking about jumping through time. Take the moment out. Anytime that you're done with this, find someone you love. Tell them. Find someone that you loved that hurt you. Forgive them and tell them. Life's too short. Go on that trip. If it's to get a couch, to get that new couch, or to go on a trip, do it. Because I'm telling you, when you're sitting on your deathbed, all you're going to do is you're going to go through all these movies in your mind. And you know what? That couch isn't going to mean anything to you. That extra picture that you put up, that extra swing set, you know, even that extra motorcycle or boat that you wanted, taking a trip with your family and creating those memories is what you're going to remember. So I asked you, what are you going to remember on your deathbed if you're lucky enough? Some people get to reminisce on it. Some people, it just, bam, it just happens, they're gone. But if it happened tomorrow or a month from now, would you live your life differently? And you would have to say, of course you would. But why not start now? Why not start now? Because when I sat and I thought about what meant most to me, I haven't created enough memories. I mean, I've had some incredible moments and some incredible times. This past year, I've had the greatest year that I could have ever had with some of the greatest friends. And I'll have memories that I'll remember till the day I die. But I don't feel that I've got enough. What about you? What about you? Do you think you have an unlimited amount of time? And another one is, there's never the right moment. There is never the right moment in time to start anything. You know, how many times have you said, I'll start it tomorrow? I'll start it at the first of the year. I'll get to it when this happens. We always feel like that there's a better moment for it to happen. And what I've learned through me mind jumping and through jumping through time is that, you know what, there's never a right moment. People literally make moments. They don't wait for moments. And I always have learned this very, very valuable rule. Time always wins. Time always wins. You know, if you're there, I want you to give me a hashtag time always wins, because it does. Time takes out the most powerful of people. Time takes out the most incredible structures. Time always wins. In the end, if you bet against time, you lose. And there's never a right moment. I want to share a story that might make you, if there's something that you really are passionate about, that you need to get done, or you want to change your life, or you want more success, or you want everything, for you to know that right now is the right moment. You know, I had a friend that from age 14, literally him and I were like brothers. I loved him. You know, he was such an amazing person. Him and I experienced, you know, going out with girls together. We had our first drink of alcohol together, just everything. We were inseparable. And, you know, something strange happened. And when I was 19 years old, we decided to try cocaine together. And I tried it, and I didn't like it, but he did. And he continued to do it till I stayed in contact with him. Till he came to be about 24 years old, and then I went my way, and he went his way. We just kind of drifted, and we stayed in contact over the years. And I still felt that strong connection. Like, he was a very strong brother to me. And I would talk to him on the phone, and, you know, he would be in and out of rehab. Just in and out of rehab. And I would hear stories, and he would make light of it about how he'd met Courtney Love, Juliette Lewis. He had met all these other people through rehab because he was living in Los Angeles. And, you know, I was still doing my consulting career. I was doing well, but, you know, not like well enough. And in the back of my mind, I always knew that I needed to get out to Los Angeles, and I just needed to go out there and just shake him. It's like, you know, what are you doing? It's like, stop. So things 10 years ahead, you know, we're in our late 30s, and he's still doing the same thing. He's building his life back up, and he's right back in rehab and just destroying himself. And it's at this point, I'm concerned. I mean, we're middle-aged adults right now, and he's still going to drugs and alcohol. And I told myself, I was like, look, I've got to get out there. I've got to go try to save my friend. So when I started making a substantial amount of money, you know, and I'm like talking about money that a lot of people really clamor over. You know, I was making around $50,000 a month at the time. And I told myself, man, I should go out to Los Angeles and go get him and bring him back here and just shake him, man. Just you know, I know I can get through to him, that I can get him to stop this. So, you know, but I felt like at the time that I just didn't have enough resources, money, to do it. So, you know, I said, you know, maybe when I get to 100,000 a month. So I got to 250,000 a month, and he still weighed on me. I got to get out there. You know, he's still in and out of rehab, and he would call me, and it would just break my heart. And you know, I got a phone call just this last summer, and he had been out of rehab for about 2 weeks, and he called me, and it was very strange. He said, Kotton, listen, I want to borrow $100. Can you send me $100 to Western Union? And I sit and I ask myself, I'm like, God, what position could anyone be in that they just ask for $100? You know, it's like 100. Why just 100? What can you do with $100? And I sat there and I said, sure, sure. I'll send you the $100. And it weighed on me so bad. I sent him 100 and he texted me back and he's like, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You don't understand it. And we're texting him like, what is wrong? Why are you still doing this? No, man, it's it. It's it. We're good. So what happened is, I'm like, sorry, that was summer of 2015. I lost contact with him. Everyone did. No one could reach him for months, and people said he was in rehab. So I get a phone call this March of this year, and it said, hey, it was actually a text, I'm sorry. It was a text from his stepsister. It said, Bobby, his name was Bobby. Bobby passed away. What? What do you mean? It says, well, they found him as a homeless man in Los Angeles. And it took them 30 days to identify the body through fingerprints. His bones were broken. And he drank himself to death. And I sat there and I was like, I wasted all this time because I thought I needed more to go save him. I was waiting for a right moment. There was never a right moment. There's never a right moment. And I know that I probably couldn't have done anything, and I know that it's not my fault. But in that moment, I could have went out there and I maybe could have done something. Maybe I could have prolonged his life a week, 2 weeks. Maybe I'm narcissistic enough to think I could have saved it. But what I'm telling you is, there's never a right time. Never. I lost my friend because I was waiting for a right time that never came. And I'm telling you that those of you that have something that's pulling at you right now, there is no other time than the present. No other time. Get out there and do it. Because I'm telling you, your time is limited. If you wait for a perfect moment, it'll never happen. That's what I did. And I was wrong. And I'll never make that mistake again with other people or with anything else. And I'm telling you right now, tick, tick, tick. Time keeps moving. Time keeps moving. And if you don't grab a hold of your dreams right now, there's never going to be a good time to wait for a right moment or a right opening. And if there's one thing I want you to pull away from this tonight, which is this. One, stop. Move forward. It's okay. So many of us sit around and worry about what other people's going to think about when we fail. So many people think about, I don't have the resources to get this done, to be successful. You don't. You lack the resourcefulness. And you always try to wait for the right moment. There is no right moment. It's right now. There might not be another moment. You're assuming that you've got time left. And we don't know that. I could be gone tomorrow. You could be gone tomorrow. I hope that's not the case. I hope that's not the case. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit more. Some people trade their time for money. And some people also feel that it's on their side. We just talked about that. Time's never on your side. It never is with anything. With anything. And some people place different value on it. How many times have you basically been with someone, and I use this basically to test people, to find out how important I am to them. And I've been doing it with friends and with girls I date and with other people is, you already know when a very valuable time to them is. Maybe it's a Saturday night, maybe it's a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, their free time, they do their yoga or they spend time with their family or whatever. If you ever want to find out how much you mean to someone, ask them to do something during their valued time. And I've been shocked to see what happens. Some of them say, absolutely. Some of them say, no, sorry, I can't do it. Then they'll shove you to their what they feel is less important time. All time is the same, which is funny. But people put different value on these things. And it's always, always, always funny to get the response to it. So the value that you place on time, just remember, all time is the same. But when we're not in a successful mindset, different people put different values on it. If you really want to test someone, test them and see their response by it. I do it, and it's worked for me every time. Next, what I don't want people to do is to reward bad time with more time. It's one of the biggest mistakes that people do with time. They'll sit there and they'll have a horrible day. They'll say, my boss was yelling at me, my kids were going crazy, my back ached, I was on a long drive, so I'm going to reward myself with more time. It's the funniest thing. You have that bad time, and then you double down and waste time with no time. It's one of the things that through jumping forward that I learned from my future self that I could never do is if I had bad time, I wanted to create good time. Not idle time, not wasted time, but I needed to create good time. How many of you have done that? And be honest, you'll have a bad day and you'll go, you know what? That's it. I'm going to order a pizza. That's it. I'm going to watch a movie. That's it. I'm going to crack open that bottle of wine. That's it. I'm going to do this. We've all done it. And I've learned to stop doing it. If whatever I feel about bad time, I make sure that I replace it immediately with good time. Being productive, doing something to make up for the bad time. Once you start learning to respect time and moving around like this, then I'm telling you, success will start to take hold. And that's one of the most important things. So ultimately, what I really want you to get out of everything right now is simply this. We've really went through and we've talked about a lot of stuff, a lot of mind-bending stuff. We've talked about jumping forward in time, getting to know your future self, coming back and knowing what it feels like, walking differently, talking differently, eating differently, doing all these things differently. I've also showed you how to micro jump so you can simply anticipate defense. So you can know what happens before it does and prepare for it, be prepared for it. It's how I run my business. It's how I do everything. I showed you how different things can affect your timeline and how you can affect your timeline in the past, how you can go back and do these things. We talked about information bombs, revelation bombs. We talked about all this stuff. We've talked about simply how never to be a victim of time, but also we're talking about this. We're talking about how to never wait for the right moment in time. Ever. Do it today. Do it today. And we've also talked about this. One, it's never about your resources. It's about your resourcefulness, about getting anything done. And that's what I learned from jumping through time. Now, it's something that I've been doing for my whole life. I would sit out in those apple orchards and I would jump forward in time many times. It wasn't until recently that I started to grasp on what I was doing. I wanted to share it with you, and a lot of you literally believe I might be crazy, or a lot of you might believe that you can benefit from this, but I really hope that a lot of you can literally pull some incredible stuff from this. One thing that I really did is I decided to jump through time one more time. And it was a very unusual experience. One night, I closed my eyes and I literally jumped as far ahead as I could. And what was weird is that it was very, very, very cloudy. I really couldn't normally see where I was. And I looked across and I seen an older man. And I didn't know who it was. I was kind of confused. And I looked at him and he kind of smiled. And he said, "I knew you would come." And I didn't know what to think of it. And I sat there for a moment because I was letting this play out in my mind. I'm like, "I don't understand." He's like, "Listen, I only have a few moments left. I don't understand. Kotton, I'm you. And I want to share with you everything so we can have a better life together. I've spent the last years of my life taking notes and writing everything down. And I want you to have it." And I'm sitting there and I don't know what to say. I look and his hand reaches out. Here is my journal. And my journal is called Guys, thanks for joining tonight. This is a webinar that I've been working on for a few months. In case you don't know who I am, my name's Kotton Grammar. I've had a moderate amount of success through online ventures, and I've been able to accumulate a little bit of money doing it. And what I didn't realize is through my mindset is what was able to get me to achieve this. And what we're going to talk about tonight, I really want you to open up your mind. I really want you to just be loose with things. This is how I get things done. What I'm going to talk about tonight might not work for everyone. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a guru. I'm not anyone. I'm just a simple guy who was born in Southern Illinois, who's had a reasonable amount of success. And hopefully what I'm going to share with you today can help you achieve some greater amounts of success. And what I want to do is the title of the webinar is what I really wanted to name it is How I Made My First Million Through Time Travel. And even though that you think this could be a funny or hilarious webinar, this is actually going to be a very, very serious webinar. And what we're going to talk about right now but I want to start out with a little bit of fun. What I want to do is get your mind kind of ready for what we're getting ready to talk about. And talk about time travel, parallel universes, and things that can happen, and how it can actually help you achieve your goals if you're able to use them the way that I do. The first thing that we're going to talk about is maybe it's a parallel universe, maybe it's time travel, maybe it's bad memory. I want you to decide what we're going to talk about here. This is the fun stuff. What I want you to do is how many of you have heard Queen's